Hello everyone, and welcome to today's session. I'm excited to guide you through our last-minute revision on important history questions and answers for the 10th social science exam. This is part I of our review. We'll cover key topics that are often asked and help you prepare effectively. Let's get started and make the most of our time together. So let's talk about the three militant forms of nationalism that were really influencing Europe at the time. First up is militarism. This is when countries adopt a strong army policy, meaning they prioritize building and maintaining powerful armed forces, often to prepare for or threaten potential conflicts. It's about showing strength and readiness to use military force if needed. Next is imperialism, which involves the expansion of territories. Countries were competing to acquire colonies and extend their influence across the world. This drive for empire building increased tensions because it created rivalry and conflict over new lands. Finally, we have extreme nationalism, which is characterized by a feeling of superiority. People with this mindset believe their nation is better than others, often leading to a sense of pride that borders on arrogance. This kind of nationalism can make conflicts more intense because it fosters a belief that one's own country is always right or destined to dominate. When we look at these three forms together, it's clear how they contributed to the overall climate of tension and competition in Europe. Each one fueled a cycle of rivalry, mistrust, and the desire for dominance, which ultimately helped set the stage for larger conflicts ahead. Now, let's talk about trench warfare. Soldiers fought from long, narrow ditches called trenches, which provided some protection but also created a very defensive and slow-moving kind of war. Because both sides were entrenched, progress was extremely difficult, leading to a stalemate where little ground was gained. This type of warfare often resulted in heavy loss of life, as soldiers faced constant danger from enemy fire, disease, and harsh living conditions. Trench warfare was especially common during World War I, and life in the trenches was incredibly tough, muddy, unsanitary, and exhausting. It really highlights how brutal and challenging this form of combat was, and it ties into the overall theme of how warfare changed during this period, becoming more deadly and grueling than ever before. So, what do you already know about trench warfare? One of the key reasons for the failure of the League of Nations was that the United States was not a member. Despite being proposed as a way to promote peace, the absence of the U.S. significantly weakened its authority and effectiveness. Another important factor was that the League lacked military power. It relied on moral persuasion and economic sanctions, which were often ineffective without a strong military backing. Additionally, the League's leadership was quite weak, making it difficult to enforce its decisions or take decisive action. As a result, it couldn't effectively stop acts of aggression by aggressive nations. This inability to respond to conflicts meant that it failed in major conflicts, ultimately undermining its purpose. So, to answer the question about causes for its failure, I'd highlight the absence of the U.S. and the lack of military strength as two major reasons. These issues prevented the League from maintaining peace and addressing international crises effectively. Let's take a closer look at the main causes of the First World War. First, we have *** nationalism. This was a powerful force that often led to conflicts between nations, as people sought to assert their independence and pride, sometimes at the expense of others. Next is ** imperialism**, which involved the rivalry for colonies and global dominance. Countries competed fiercely to expand their empires, creating tensions across different regions. Then, we have ** alliances**. Europe was divided into two main groups of countries that promised to support each other in case of war, which meant that a conflict involving one nation could quickly escalate into a larger war involving many. Moving on, militarism** played a big role. Nations were engaged in an arms race, building up their armies and weapons, which heightened the sense of threat and readiness for conflict. The Balkan issues also contributed significantly. This region was politically unstable, with a lot of ethnic tensions and shifting borders, which made it a hotspot for conflict. Now, An event that often gets the spotlight is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand *. His murder was the spark that ignited the already tense situation. Finally, this assassination led to an immediate outbreak of war as alliances kicked in and countries mobilized quickly. All these factors together created a perfect storm, leading to one of the most devastating conflicts in history. Understanding these causes helps us grasp how complex and interconnected the path to war really was, fitting into the larger story of how Europe and the world changed during that period. Let's take a closer look at the work of the League of Nations. First, it was involved in settling international disputes, helping countries resolve conflicts peacefully rather than through war. It also worked to maintain peace efforts, which meant trying to prevent new conflicts from breaking out. Another key area was promoting disarmament, encouraging countries to reduce their weapons stockpiles to avoid escalation. The League also aimed to improve labor conditions worldwide, advocating for fairer working environments and workers' rights. It played a role in controlling the spread of diseases, which was vital for global health and stability. Additionally, the League sought to protect smaller nations, giving them a voice and preventing powerful countries from dominating them. However, despite these efforts, it's important to acknowledge that the League ultimately failed to stop World War II from happening. So, while it made significant contributions in many areas, its limitations remind us of the challenges in maintaining lasting peace. Let's talk about the White Terror in Indochina. During this period, French colonial rule was in full effect, and it was marked by intense suppression of any nationalist movements seeking independence. The colonial authorities used arrests and punishments to silence those who dared to oppose them. This often involved violence against the local people, creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. The public lived in constant fear of being targeted or arrested simply for expressing their national aspirations. This period of repression was a crucial part of the broader struggle against colonial domination and highlights the harsh measures used to maintain control. It also underscores the resilience of those fighting for independence despite these oppressive tactics. So, what do you already know about the White Terror in Indochina? Today, let's talk about dollar imperialism. Essentially, this is when the United States used money as a tool for control rather than direct military force. It involved loans and investments made in other countries, which often gave the U.S. significant influence over their economies. These financial ties translated into political influence, allowing the U.S. to sway decisions without overtly intervening. This approach led to economic domination, where the U.S. could shape the economic landscape of other nations. The key idea here is that this form of control was often indirect. It wasn't about occupying countries militarily, but about wielding power through financial means. So, when we define dollar imperialism, we're talking about a strategy where economic resources and financial leverage are used to extend a nation's influence and control over others, shaping global affairs in a subtle but powerful way. This concept ties into our overall theme of how economic tools have become central to international dominance. The rise and growth of nationalism in South Africa is a crucial part of understanding the country's history. It all began with the apartheid policy, which systematically created inequality and racial segregation. This injustice sparked a desire for change among the oppressed populations. As a result, the African National Congress, or ANC, was formed to fight for rights and equality. Over time, political awareness grew rapidly among South Africans, especially among the oppressed communities who realized their collective power. This awareness led to mass protests and resistance against unjust laws, showing the strength of a united people. Key leaders emerged during this period, inspiring and guiding the movement toward change. International support also played a significant role, as global attention put pressure on the South African government to end racial discrimination. All these factors contributed to a powerful movement that ultimately aimed to dismantle apartheid and establish a more equal society. This process reflects the broader theme of how national identity and collective action can challenge injustice and bring about profound change. Now, let's take a closer look at the Beveridge Report. This report was introduced in Britain and marked a significant turning point in social policy. It laid out a comprehensive social welfare plan aimed at improving the lives of ordinary people. The focus was on key areas like health and employment, which are essential for building a healthier and more stable society. One of the main goals was to remove poverty, making sure that everyone had access to basic necessities. By doing so, it aimed to raise living standards across the country. Overall, the Beveridge Report was about creating a safety net that protected citizens from the worst hardships, aligning with the broader theme of social progress and reform. What do you already know about this influential report? So let's take a closer look at the objectives of the IMF. First and foremost, the IMF aims to maintain monetary stability. This means working to keep inflation low and exchange rates stable, which is essential for a healthy global economy. When currencies are stable, it becomes easier for countries to plan their economic policies and for businesses to operate confidently. Next, the IMF promotes global trade. By providing financial stability and supporting sound economic policies, the IMF helps create an environment where countries can trade more freely and efficiently. This interconnectedness is vital for growth and development worldwide. Another key objective is to provide financial assistance. When countries face balance of payments problems or economic crises, the IMF steps in with loans and support to help them recover. This assistance is crucial to prevent economic downturns from spiraling into larger problems. Reducing poverty is also at the core of the IMF's mission. By fostering economic stability and growth, the IMF aims to create opportunities for all, helping countries implement policies that lift people out of poverty. Finally, supporting economic growth is fundamental. The IMF works with countries to develop sustainable policies that promote development, create jobs, and improve living standards. All these objectives are interconnected and support the larger goal of fostering a stable, prosperous global economy. The effects of the Second World War were truly profound and wide-ranging. Firstly, there was a massive loss of life, with millions of soldiers and civilians losing their lives across the globe. This tragedy underscored the devastating human cost of conflict. Along with that, we saw widespread destruction of property, from cities to infrastructure, which took years to rebuild. Economically, the war triggered a crisis, leading many countries into severe hardship and financial instability. However, from these hardships, new international efforts emerged, such as the formation of the United Nations, aimed at promoting peace and cooperation among nations. The war also marked the rise of superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, who became dominant players on the global stage. This shift in power laid the groundwork for the Cold War, a period of intense rivalry and tension. Another significant effect was the end of colonialism, as many nations in Asia, Africa, and beyond began a push for independence, inspired by the principles of self-determination that gained prominence after the war. Lastly, the war spurred remarkable technological development, accelerating innovations in weapons, medicine, and industry, many of which shaped our modern world. Overall, these effects show how the war not only reshaped nations and borders, but also influenced global politics, economics, and technology, shaping the world we live in today. All right, let's talk about the Baghdad Pact. It was formed in 1955, and it was essentially a military alliance. The countries involved were mainly from the Middle East, and the main goal was to stop the spread of communism in the region. This was during the Cold War, so stopping communism was a top priority for many Western nations. The pact was supported by these Western countries, which saw it as a way to contain Soviet influence. Overall, the Baghdad Pact is an example of early Cold War alliances aimed at regional stability and preventing Soviet expansion. It connects to our broader theme of how global tensions shaped regional politics during this period. So, what was the Marshall Plan? Well, it was essentially a massive effort by the United States to provide economic aid to Europe after World War II. The goal was to help rebuild European economies that had been devastated by the war. By doing this, the U.S. aimed to stabilize these countries and promote economic recovery. But it wasn't just about rebuilding. It was also a strategic move to prevent the spread of communism, which was a growing concern at the time. Strengthening the economies of European nations would make them less vulnerable to communist influence. This plan also helped to improve overall economic stability and growth across the continent. And of course, it significantly improved relations between the U.S. and European countries, fostering stronger partnerships that would last for decades. So, in essence, the Marshall Plan was about both economic aid and strategic diplomacy, using economic recovery as a tool to promote stability and prevent the spread of communism. It's a key example of how economic policy and international relations are deeply connected, especially in the context of the post-war world. Now, let's talk about the role of Mao Zedong in shaping modern China. As the leader of the Communist Party, Mao was the driving force behind uniting the peasants and rallying support for revolutionary change. His leadership was crucial in leading the revolution that culminated in 1949, when the People's Republic of China was officially established. Mao's policies, especially land reforms, aimed to redistribute land from the wealthy to the peasants, which helped to gain popular support and transform the social structure. He also focused on strengthening the economy, implementing policies to modernize and develop China's industries. All these efforts were instrumental in making China a communist country, aligning the nation with the ideals of socialism and Marxism-Leninism. Overall, Mao Zedong's role was absolutely pivotal. His leadership not only united the country, but also laid the foundation for a communist China that would continue to evolve in the decades that followed. This slide highlights how his vision and actions fundamentally changed China's political and social landscape, making him a central figure in its communist transformation.